Cinelog is a series where I go through the history of film and try to watch every important or interesting release in chronological order. Today's year of subject, 1946, where 45 was the year of finishing things up in Europe and Japan, 46 was the year of tying up loose ends, tracking down war criminals who'd escaped to South America, reacclimating homecoming soldiers into society, and finding new purpose in the wake of accomplishing our wartime objectives. Europe got to work reconstructing their film industries, which returned fearlessly to save countries that had just been torn down, waking them up to new societal flaws and hardships. Let's check it out. The first film I watched was Gilda. This movie is about a mysterious American who by chance becomes the manager of a casino in Rio de Janeiro after impressing the owner. Things get a bit complicated when the owner gets a girlfriend who has a troubled history with the American. Now this is a movie. See that? Movie. Sleazy, nonchalant, and downright filthy for 1946. This is an absolute thrill from start to finish. The opening scene sets up the character perfectly, and the screenwriting here is really incredible. There is conflict in every single scene. The characters are constantly at odds with each other, developing more and more tension between them. And the gradual reveal of information keeps you on your toes the whole way through. The casting is perfect, too. You've got Glenn Ford and George McCready, who are both in this masculine ritual duel trying to out-dominate each other. And then there's the titular Gilda, played by Rita Hayworth, who is drop-dead gorgeous, and holy shit, she can act. Her range in this is nothing short of exceptional. She genuinely might have had the greatest performance of the entire year. My only big issue is with the ending, which I won't spoil, but doesn't feel right for this type of film. Next, I dipped into some Italian neorealism with Vittorio De Sica's Shoeshine. It starts out a bit slow, but once you get to the prison and the plot starts to take shape, it's not hard to see why this is such an excellent film. The two main characters are incredibly dynamic, with individual flaws and internal conflicts. The way their relationship arcs over the course of the film, first succumbing to the prison system, then by the end perpetuating it, is what makes it hit so hard. De Sica really earns those emotional beats, and his attention to realism is unmatched here. The moral grays that define Italian neorealism are handled beautifully, though there are places where I think he could have taken it even further. Like, imagine if he humanized the prison guards more. Maybe the film would feel less hopeless, but it would advance the realism to a whole new dimension. Then I hopped over to France for A Day in the Country. Jean Renoir is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, and this is often considered one of his masterpieces. What I didn't know until I watched it was that this is actually only the first act and ending of an uncompleted featurette that he was commissioned to make in 1936. It was abandoned after a stretch of bad weather forced production to shut down, though edited and released as a short film in 1946. It's a shame that this was never completed, because I can totally see where a second or third act would have made this a masterwork, as not every character or subplot gets the resolution that they deserve. But as it is, this movie is still pretty freaking great. By the point things wrap up, Renoir has delivered so many wonderful cinematic treats that any conclusion would probably satisfy. The depiction of simple human pleasures, as well as the beauty of nature, is life-affirming in a way that I don't often see in film. The plot is carried by a perfectly balanced conflict between the two male leads over their romantic interest in the same woman. Renoir's direction is deft, as always, and the pointed use of music is enchanting. While I don't think it's quite the masterpiece it could have been, in its abridged form, I still think it's an absolute must-see. Then I checked out some of the major noir films of the year. Orson Welles' The Stranger, Howard Hawks' The Big Sleep, and Robert Siodmak's The Killers. The Stranger is Welles' highest-grossing movie. It's also, maybe incidentally, his absolute worst. How do you go from Citizen Kane to this?
Any child could see you'd wind up killing yourself.
In less than a decade. It's so fucking bad. Orson Welles plays a Nazi who tries to marry a senator's daughter so he can sneak into the American political system. Now that actually sounds like a cool, like, spy espionage movie or whatever, but what The Stranger actually is a stupid noir caper where Welles murders someone, murders a dog, gaslights his wife, and then turns everyone against him. The characters are one-dimensional, the scenes are flat, the acting isn't even good. Welles looks like he's constipated the whole time. Ugh. Fortunately, The Big Sleep was next, and oh my god, what a palate cleanser. Frankly, it's up there with Primer and Memento as like one of the most confusing movies ever made, but it's also dumb confusing. But it's okay because it knows it's dumb confusing. The mystery is convoluted and loaded with red herrings, yet it doesn't even affect the quality too much because the writing and production are so good. The dialogue's great, the direction's great, the Humphrey Bogart is great. The mystery is just a complete shit show and I have no idea what happened. Peak film noir. Anyway, The Killers was a pleasant surprise. First of all, one of the greatest opening scenes to any film I have ever seen. Seriously, it's up there with like the opening of Inglourious Basterds for me. This movie is about an insurance investigator trying to solve a murder to pay the beneficiary of the victim's life insurance policy. It sounds boring, I know, but it's actually great. The way that the plot unravels and you learn more and more about the person's life through a series of Citizen Kane-style flashbacks is really intelligent and helps move the plot forward very, very effectively. I could probably make a very long video discussing all the reasons I love this movie, but I'll keep it short for this one. Basically, this is the idyllic film noir. The plotting and pacing are perfect. It doesn't miss a single beat, and it is razor focused on its central theme of fate. Best noir of the year. After that, I watched Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious. Now, I'll be honest, I used to really not get Hitchcock at all. His movies just didn't do anything for me. However, watching them in the context of their release, I have seriously grown to respect him as a director. His style is impeccable and really ahead of its time. Revisiting Notorious, with that in context, I have to admit, it's a masterpiece. This is another loose ends of World War II movie. A government agent recruits the daughter of a Nazi war criminal to go undercover and infiltrate the organization of his former associate, now exiled to South America. Wonder where that location's come up before. Complications arise when the agent and the daughter start to form a romance. This is another one that deserves a whole video of its own. On the simplest level, this movie is about trust. With intense focus, it portrays how having too much trust or too little trust in someone can lead to ruin. Cary Grant, who plays the secret agent, lacks trust in Bergman's protagonist. It hurts their relationship and it hurts their respective jobs. His arc is realizing that he can trust her and finally professing his love in the closing scene. Claude Rains' Nazi antagonist blindly trusts Bergman, and yeah, that ends up being his downfall. The characters are incredibly fleshed out. The focus on the theme is super tight. Oh yeah, and it's tense as shit. He ain't called the master of suspense for nothing. After that, I saw Beauty and the Beast. The weird one. I don't know what to say about this one. It's magnificent. The direction is great, the story is simple but made very effective by its empathetic characters, and holy shit, you will scarcely see better practical effects in any movie anywhere. Beauty and the Beast was instrumental in rejuvenating the French film industry after the fallout of World War II, and it's not hard to see why. Super fun and legitimately fantastic. Spectacle-heavy fantasy cinema at its very best. This next string of movies I watched were all pretty great, so I'm gonna speed through them. A Matter of Life and Death is directed by the Archers and sees a British airline pilot miraculously escape death and try to legitimize his survival against the court of heaven. This could have been a really terrible, cheesy melodrama, but it actually ends up being a really great rom-com. The depiction of heaven is very interesting and fleshed out, and the characters are all super likable. While the end just basically devolves into a big courtroom scene, which the screenplay uses as a platform to express its political message, it's made very compelling by how it incorporates the stakes. If we lose the case, our protagonist bites the dust, so it works seamlessly as part of the narrative crux. The Best Years of Our Lives is the 1946 Best Picture winner, and probably the film most indicative of the country's political climate at the time. A jingoistic romanticization of military service that convincingly portrays the struggles of three soldiers returning from World War II and trying to reacclimate to civilian life. The main conflict between Frederick March and Donna Andrews, as well as Andrews' romance with Teresa Wright's character, is the most compelling aspect of the film. The stuff regarding the character of Homer, while handled very well, I find significantly less interesting. In terms of tying up World War II's loose ends, no film this year was as indicative of that theme as this one. Plus, you know I love me some classic deep focus cinematography, and this movie's got that shit in spades. Then I saw Paisan, which is Roberto Rossellini's follow-up to Rome Open City. And while not quite as good, it does succeed in a multitude of different ways. The movie is essentially a series of 6 short films about the Allied liberation of Nazi-occupied Italy. I really love episodes 1, 3, and 4. As a depiction of war, it is unflinchingly realistic and even quite tragic. But I mean, that's to be expected from Italian neorealism, right? Just a really good movie about miscommunication and Italy's perspective in the war. Some of the episodes were harder to be invested in, but I think for the most part, this is a worthy follow-up to Rome Open City. So then I made a point to check out a Western from this year, and everyone said that John Ford's My Darling Clementine was like a masterpiece, so I watched it. It's not. Okay, I'll be fair. It's not a bad film at all. The depiction of the West as this barren, meaningless wasteland is really interesting, and I do love the cinematography and performances here. But oh my god, the script is non-existent. The characters are empty, there's next to no plot progression, compelling conflict is all but a wishful fantasy. You have to really force yourself to extract all of the movie's substance out of the barren cinematography and minimalistic dialogue. Without good characters or plotting, it's a challenge to be invested. Then I watched It's a Wonderful Life. Do I have to say anything here? Look, there are a lot of upbeat, classic family movies that I don't find myself feeling super invested in, even if I really very much appreciate them. This is not one of those movies. This is legitimately fantastic. A couple rickety directing and editing choices, but for the most part, I mean, this is a really powerful film, and without a doubt, director Frank Capra's most fluent artistic statement. It would be an understatement to say that the last 5 minutes aren't anything less than among the most cathartic of any film ever released. It's built up to marvelously and pays off every single one of the pointed motifs and supporting characters established throughout the story prior. Jimmy Stewart's character is so incredibly likable that to see him saved by such a miracle just works. Certain maximalist elements of the presentation, mostly in the humor, and some of Capra's blunt direction choices allow the fantasy stuff to weave in organically, though he is prone to over-elaborating in his scenes sometimes. But again, I can't really say anything too harsh about this movie. It's just so pure. Then I watched, oh boy, controversial take alert. Get your hate comments ready. I watched David Lean's Great Expectations, which I gave a C. I mean, it's called Great Expectations, so I went into the movie with great expectations. Plus the fact that this man made a little masterpiece called Brief Encounter not 1 year prior. But my god, this movie sucks ass. I mean, Lean isn't the problem. His direction is the best part. The story is just so boring. I actually really enjoyed all the stuff with the escaped convict. I love his relationship with Pip. I think it features a lot of conflict, and I genuinely like the convict character. But they have to make way for this god-awful romance plot that is so unconvincing. It's just boring. Like, there's no conflict. There's nothing happening. Plus, look, I love David, but you can't just cut from a scene where a woman burns herself alive to this.
Give him a nod, Mr. Pip. That's what he likes.
You made acquaintance with my son at his office, I expect.
Yes. Not await him, if you please, like winking.
Yes.
So then I wrapped up the year with a Duel in the Sun. And look, I don't like this film at all, but let's just say, this year went out with a bang. This is one of the most jaw-dropping, spectacular failures of classic Hollywood. It's so poorly acted. Gregory Peck is playing like a high school jock, and then Jennifer Jones is in blackface the whole time. Her emotional acting, I say with quotations, is so over the top. It's like no one was directing her. The script is garbage. The characters are generic and unlikable. The dialogue is piss poor, especially for the time it was released. It's just an epic failure, but an entertaining one that I do recommend you see just for the fact that, like, it's so funny. Oh, and the real reason I wanted to watch it is because it's got my queen, Lily Gish, in it. And my god, she got old.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Pip and I have business to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
Come and sit down.